Hey everybody, Michael Tracey here. So this one was very cathartic for me. Aaron Maté, as I'm sure many of you know, was one of the most assiduous chroniclers of Russiagate from the quote skeptical perspective, meaning he mercilessly rebutted all the fantastical claims coming from the conspiracy peddlers. He was grounded always in the facts. He engaged with the substance and the details. His work was just absolutely critical, and it was a lifesaver for me. And we get into so many issues raised by this debacle, and I think you'll appreciate it. This was recorded on Tuesday, April 2nd, and the following day, Aaron was announced as a winner of the Izzy Award, which is named after the legendary independent journalist I.F. Stone. And although I do admit that I find obnoxious this culture of journalists constantly giving one another awards and heaping each other with melodramatic praise, I make an exception for Aaron because he very, very obviously deserves it. So that's coming up. Please subscribe on Patreon and on YouTube. I have added this podcast to all the typical directories like iTunes and Stitcher and such, but apparently it takes days for them to approve it, which I wasn't aware of. So that's happening. Patience. And let's get into it. All right. Hey, Aaron.
Hey, Michael.
How's it going?
Good. How you doing?
Oh, I don't know.
First of all, thanks for coming to Brooklyn.
I know.
I know it might be
You're
triggering
welcome.
for you.
I feel very hypocritical right now. I've been impugning the entire borough for the past week. But as I just told you about 20 seconds ago before we started recording, I'm a previous resident of Brooklyn.
Yes.
And a registered voter in Brooklyn, I think, still, because I never bothered to change it. So I'm kind of indicting myself with my Brooklyn crusade. But that's weird because, this is going to be a tangent, but I actually like a lot of aspects of Brooklyn. It's just a cultural signifier for a certain set of people that I utterly loathe with every fiber of my being.
Yes.
So that's why
The problem is it's become a pejorative for everybody.
Right.
So, for example, you and I and Glenn Greenwald, we might use Brooklyn pejoratively on Twitter. But then some of the people who probably hate people like, me or say Ben Norton, who also lives in Brooklyn, they might use Brooklyn in the same way too. So the question is, who has the right to use Brooklyn pejoratively? Which side of the Russiagate debate has a right to use Brooklyn pejoratively?
I don't know. Maybe we should ask Brooklyn Borough President for his opinion.
Marty. Oh yes.
Eric Adams. Right?
Eric Adams. That's right. That'd be a great thing for him to communicate.
I'll go interview him and we'll splice in a quote from him commenting on this big controversy.
Good deal.
No, but it's like it actually reflects on a serious issue, at least to me, because there is this posture now among a big segment of people in media where they have this affect, where they're perpetually like ironic and funny online. They don't take anything seriously ostensibly. And now they want to say that, yeah, we never really cared about Russiagate, and you guys seem inordinately fixated on it, meaning like our little skeptic caucus, which is the term that I coined. So we should have like a political formation. We can even maybe stand for election or something. So
the skeptic. Oh yeah, we'll do well in any election.
Right.
We'll do great.
We'll do well in the Democratic primaries. God, we might win a Republican primary actually.
Oh yes, yeah. If we only talk about Russiagate, though, when we open our mouth about other issues, like at least when I do on Twitter, I talk about Puerto Rico or Yemen or Venezuela. That's when my Trump supporting followers, turn on me, right. which is good. It's all about dialogue in this country, which is something that's been missing. And
a lot of them got upset about me when I was, obsessed with Ilhan Omar for like 3
There
weeks.
we go. Yes.
But actually, you know what? Some of them said I was right. So I wouldn't rule out a potential to reach people, whether they be Trump supporters or leftists or whoever. I don't like this idea that we need to foreclose on the possibility of using quote logic and reason, which people make fun of now. Like it's bad to be interested in logic and reason, but it can work. People are malleable.
Yeah, and what I know is that people, from my interactions with Trump supporters on Twitter, is that people are fed up with phony neoliberals who give them just like lofty but vacuous rhetoric, and they're fed up with that. They want people who have some degree of honesty, even if it's even if that means being honest about views they don't agree with. And I get the sense that that's part of what people appreciate about the leftist Russiagate skeptics is that we're honest about our political positions, but yet we're not drinking the Kool-Aid, and we're not going along with this 2-year liberal fixation just because on the surface
3 years. I keep correcting
3 years first. I'm sorry, 3-year fixation.
You got to get that timeline right because
fair enough.
We can't at all underemphasize the length of time for which this was an utter absurd preoccupation for everybody in the country.
Fair enough. So so they recognize that we're not just going along with something because on the surface it has partisan utility. So yeah, and listen, in terms of people who now say they didn't take Russiagate seriously, like the one thing I'll say is anybody who doesn't have institutional security in media, I get why they didn't speak up about it, or they chose not to oppose it, because as we've learned ourselves, if you speak up against it, then there are consequences. There are. There are. And so anybody who is trying to get on, is trying to get published, I totally get why if you put your head down and ignored it. And the fact is there were more important issues than like Paul Manafort's tax and bank fraud case and all this stupid stuff.
Michael Cohen's taxi medallion scandal.
Yeah, exactly. So, like it's those people who had the institutional security, who recognized what a fraud it was, who recognized how damaging it was to progressive politics and everything that we all ostensibly hold dear. It's those people who either were silent or who catered to it, which are many. It's those people who I hold to a higher standard and who I'm more critical of.
It's just I'm so disinclined to accept rationalizations from people for careerist reasons. Yeah, everybody has to take into consideration their career prospects or their financial security, including us.
Yeah.
So to me, it's just cowardice. Yeah, you might have an explanation. I don't give a shit. I mean, screw you.
It is cowardice, but it's like we got also like you and I don't have children. You know? And so
I didn't force you to have kids.
Well, but if you do have kids, then then that's part of how you judge yourself when you look in the mirror every morning.
By the way, I do have a long lost love child that you don't know about.
Okay, well, fair enough. I didn't
It's not true. It's not true, all right?
I didn't mean to be presumptuous.
Listeners.
But you know what I mean? So it's like, like we all have to look, we're all responsible for how we look at ourselves in the mirror. And we're not responsible for how someone else does when they do. And how they judge themselves and gauge their own level of integrity when they do that. Listen, I'm all for making fun of people and for calling them cowards, and there are plenty of them. But we're going to name a couple tonight. I'm sure we will. I'm sure, and that's fine.
Name and shame, baby.
but it's like I don't believe in holding everyone to the same standard that we hold to ourselves, because we're all different. We're all different situations. Not everybody needs to be a martyr on the Russiagate altar.
Well, I guess that's true, but you say everybody as if like this category we're talking about would encompass the entire general population. We're talking about people who are paid to express opinions about current events.
Yes.
And to do reporting on current events.
Yes. Yes.
So it's not like it's just, Joe Schmo in the deli across the street. I've always been adamant that I don't blame people who got sucked into the MSNBC vortex or even who got swindled by these Twitter charlatans.
Yes.
But my ire is, I think, justly reserved for people who are in the media.
Yep. Yeah.
And who not only dropped the ball, they exacerbated the worst elements of this entire thing.
Well, in terms of those with institutional security, for whom there will be no professional consequence if they, practice journalism 101, then it's those people who I hold in special contempt. And we have many colleagues in leftist adversarial media who fall into that category. The editorial staff at The Intercept, who I think basically caved to the pressure of having the fact that Glenn Greenwald was becoming like the face of The Intercept on Russiagate, and instead of welcoming that as like a good thing, they succumbed to pressure and hired James Risen to
they got really nervous about it.
And they went, and then when they got this like really inconsequential leak from Reality Winner purporting to show this Russian effort to hack into U.S. voting systems, they totally distorted what the document itself actually said, blew it up into be something way bigger than it actually was, and helped fuel this like new fear mongering about the Russian threat to our voting system, and like took mileage from it and said like we did this great service in warning America about the Russian threat, and like basically
Give me a break.
It was a joke, and when I interviewed James Risen when I was at the Real News, and
that was epic.
I tried to discuss with him the contents of the actual document upon which their article was based. He couldn't defend it, and he hung up on me.
James Risen is a perfect example of somebody who, like pre-2016, you would have thought to yourself, this is an extremely formidable, respectable journalist or media figure.
I wouldn't have thought
You wouldn't have thought that?
No, because if you look at his record, I mean, he's done some great stuff. I would have said he's done some great stuff, but he also played a key role in the Wenho Lee
That's
case.
right. But that was in the 90s, right?
Yeah, okay, that's part of his record.
But it's part of his record, but he was then, I think, better known for the skeptical reporting he did on Iraq.
His main thing, I don't recall his Iraq reporting. I thought he was good.
There were some times where he pushed against the prevailing New York Times narrative on Iraq reporting.
He exposed the NSA surveillance program at the New York Times.
Yeah, and that's another one. I mean, that's a big one.
Notable. Totally admirable. He deserved to win the Pulitzer. He did, but we
don't have to reel it again. Yeah. James Risen's network. The point is, like, he is somebody who I perceive as kind of emblematic of this wider trend, which is that 2016, it's like everything that happened prior to 2016 is like the Dark Ages or something, or like the Byzantine era, where there's like this kind of clean break.
Yep.
Where it seems like everybody kind of restructured their brains after 2016, and every assumption that you had about people had collapsed.
You say restructured their brains. I say lost their minds.
Right. I mean, their brains just were kind of exploded or something.
I know. It's interesting. I think it's a combination of many things. Russiagate became the prevailing framework within which we were allowed to oppose Donald Trump.
Right.
So to be against Trump, we had to buy into this belief he was like a Russian conspirator.
Right.
We couldn't just make a distinction between like the question of whether or not he colluded with Russia and whether or not he's a danger to the planet. It became conflated.
Yeah, and there was also this guiding belief that he was a world historic menace.
Yeah.
He was the worst possible person who could ever be elected president.
And it was unique to him.
It was unique to him.
Yeah.
And therefore unique methods had to be employed to stop him.
Yeah.
One of which was journalists becoming essentially resistance warriors.
Yeah.
And supplanting their ordinary skepticism and their ordinary insistence that the facts be adhered to with this belief that we must do anything to stop Trump.
Yeah.
So if that is your guiding impulse, then of course you're not going to be as diligent in applying critical scrutiny to the coalescence of a narrative like Russiagate, because you're saying this is what we have to use as a vehicle to topple Trump. But actually, a lot of the security state officials who launched the investigation seem to have a similar mindset.
Yes, I mean the one thing I'd add to that is to say that the mindset was we have to stop Trump, but it was within a very narrow framework, right? It's not as if the prevailing mindset was we have to stop Trump because he's going to pull out of the Paris Climate Accords, because he's waging war on Iran, because he's going to overthrow governments in Venezuela, because he's going to assault Obamacare, because he's going to oversee the tax cuts.
I'm talking about during the election.
We didn't have exactly the
campaign.
So it became we have to stop him
because he's like temperamentally unsuited.
Yes, because he's not a proper steward of the power structure.
That makes the presidency look bad.
Exactly. So it was.
And I'm like, good.
Yeah. So it was,
not that I supported Trump, right? Okay, people, I didn't support Trump, but I never thought it was necessarily a bad thing per se that his obvious vulgarity would diminish this aura around the presidency as like this hallowed sanctum.
That was not my reason for opposing him, and I was uncomfortable from the get-go. The reasons, like the bounds in which opposition to him could occur. It was we were also supposed to be upset because he talked about having warmer relations with Russia. That was supposed to be a bad thing. We were supposed to also be upset that he talked about he paid lip service to the anti-interventionist sentiment that's very real out there. And he talked about getting out of Syria, getting out of Libya. He talked about the Iraq War being a mistake. I think it was all a con on his part, but I think it was reflecting a very real sentiment that he saw out there that the rest of the elite structure were ignoring and didn't want to see.
I don't know that I would quite call it a con, right? Because on the one hand, he definitely did sense that in the electorate there was a genuine desire for anti-interventionism. Anti-interventionism is always popular in the electorate, except when there's especially heated periods like just prior to the Iraq War or after 9/11. Like that's sort of an anomaly. But, Trump was the relatively more, quote, anti-interventionist candidate, or at least that was the perception vis-a-vis Hillary, and he won. Obama was obviously the much more anti-interventionist candidate in 2008 and 12. Again, I think Bush would be an outlier here. Just because of 9/11 and Iraq kind of.
But Bush also, by the way, campaigned
in 2000
as being like not, I don't want a nation build.
He criticized Gore.
That's right.
From a non-interventionist perspective. So this is always the politically prudent thing to do, except in very unique circumstances like 2004 when Bush won against Kerry.
It's still a con, though, is what I'm saying. I don't think Trump actually had any.
Is it a con? Because he's like, there have been instances where he's sought. So it's a mixed bag, right? Obviously. But there have been instances where he sought to implement policy directives that would be in line with the non-interventionist mindset, like the withdrawal from Syria, which is now, I guess, off the table because there was sort of a bureaucratic move against it and it was thwarted. But he did give that order in December of last year.
He did, but he's also escalated bombings in countries, and he's escalated support for the Saudi war in Yemen. So it's a mixed bag, and
then North Korea would be another example, although that was also stymied by Bolton, who we brought in.
That's true.
I was on Tucker the night that the Mueller report was submitted at 5 p.m. at the end of the workday. And I was in New Hampshire, so I went and did Tucker that day because there was the breaking news, and we got on a digression briefly in our little segment because I was likening the media failure, the scale of the media failure to WMD Iraq, like the Taibbi thesis, which I agree with.
Yeah.
But we got into I got into a little digressive, side note, which is just that I mentioned, because the point I was making was, I feel as though the worst offenders journalistically for Russiagate are not going to pay any serious reputational consequences. They're just going to keep ascending to greater and greater heights of power and influence, which we all know is going to happen. But that's exactly what happened with Iraq.
Yeah.
Jeffrey Goldberg, who I just have such throbbing contempt for, I can't fully capture. He wrote, and I just tweeted about this yesterday, I think. He wrote one of the flagship pieces that set the kind of theoretical and factual groundwork for the Bush administration's case for war in 2002.
Yeah.
And he was lauded for that. And did he ever pay any price? No. He's the editor-in-chief of The Atlantic now.
Yeah.
And he brought in people like David Frum, chief Russiagate advocate, Natasha Bertrand, who's like just a demented, I don't want to be too mean, but her entire approach to this whole episode has just been horribly, not counterproductive is just way too charitable a word, but that's what I'll go with just to be nice. But he brought in people like that. Who else? There got to be more that's slipping my mind. The point is that the fact that because Goldberg was never held accountable, he kept rising through the ranks of power and influence. And I was telling Tucker that's exactly what's going to happen here. And I said to him, frankly, part of the problem in that regard is Fox News, because you have people on who are the big Iraq war advocates even now, and he agreed with me, and Tucker actually brought up, one of whom is the National Security Advisor, John Bolton. I said, yes, that's true. John Bolton still, I think, is unrepentant about his support for Iraq. And I asked, why did President Trump, because I know he watches the show, why did President Trump appoint John Bolton to be his national security advisor when over and over and over again he said, even during the campaign and the presidency, how horrible of a disaster he thought the Iraq war was? I don't feel like I've ever heard Trump ask that question because the media is so horrible.
Yeah, that's a good question.
You said on this occasion, 30 occasions you could name where he was railing against the Iraq war. Why then did you appoint John Bolton? Because he's undermined you on Syria. He's gotten you into a horrible situation in Venezuela, which I guess was partially Trump's own initiative as well, but I doubt it. And we don't have to get into that. North Korea, he undermined he blew up the latest summit.
Yeah.
This guy is a scourge.
Yeah. Yeah.
Anyway.
Because, well, Trump, yeah, look, it's hard to know exactly the internal dynamic there.
But the point was, he did bring to fruition, to an extent, the parts of the anti-interventionist, quote, mindset that he evinced. Now, when I noted that at the time in 2016, people were saying, oh, you support Trump, you're backing Trump. I'm saying, no, I'm just relating what he's exhibiting. And you're saying that, and I'm also saying, look how comparatively bad that makes Hillary look, that she has no capacity to put forward a case for any kind of change in foreign policy. She's just going to be a worsening of what Obama was.
There's no argument for me that the fact that Hillary Clinton was was outflanked when it comes to intervention from the left by Donald Trump speaks horribly of Hillary Clinton. But I guess the only thing is, I don't assign any coherence to Donald Trump, and that's why I suspect that his whole anti-intervention posture was a con, because he's also done things that escalated. He has bombed Syria twice.
Sure.
Before Bolton came along.
Yeah.
And also, so it's hard to say. Look, listen.
But he would like go on CNN during the height of the Iraq War, and he was like railing against Bush, saying the Iraq War is a disaster, and that was before
Trump.
Well, yeah, Trump.
He also support. But the thing is,
we don't have to get. This is sort of ancillary, but you know what I mean.
This is a big digression. They've also dug up quotes of Trump where he supported the Iraq War. So I wouldn't.
Kind of. He made like an offhand remark on Howard Stern once. It wasn't like. It's. We don't have to get into the weeds on this because it's kind of not what we're supposed to be talking about. The point is just that I forget like why we even went down that digressive path, but let me just bring up an entirely new subject. Okay, so for progressive media, quote unquote, progressive with a capital P, I like to say.
Yeah.
Here's my argument for why they are more morally blameworthy for the entire Russiagate debacle than even the more conventional mainstream media. Okay, so New York Times, Washington Post, whatever. Even more morally culpable, arguably, than Maddow, who, as we know, was like the most egregious, despicable manifestation of every Russiagate excess. It's because to have these online outlets that have, a different business model, have autonomy, have the ability to go against the grain from the mainstream narratives, for them to give, quote, progressive legitimization to this militaristic, deranged conspiracy theory for 3 years, right?
Yeah.
That almost makes them more culpable than the more mainstream organs, because they're saying they're not. There's nothing that necessarily requires them to do what they did. They could have theoretically gone in a different direction, but I think because of a combination of careerism, a combination of just financial motivation, because it's a great story, got a lot of clicks and ratings and whatever, lots of social media attention, and also just sheer stupidity in some cases. I have to say, I'm not going to name names, but there are some people I just feel are dumb and went along with it because of that. But anyway, what do you think?
Well, it's okay. Let's try to be our most compassionate selves for a second.
I refuse.
For a second, and try to assign the best motives and intent of people possible. So what if people were just totally confused by Trump's victory, scared by it, and didn't know what to do, and they were presented with this narrative across, mainstream media and coming from, huge, large parts of the establishment, that Donald Trump was compromised by Russia.
Right.
And so what if that narrative was just comforting for them, and it was easy for them to adopt? That, to me, is my most charitable interpretation.
I don't even see that as charitable. I almost see it as childish.
Well,
it's like you need a fairy tale to make you feel better.
It is childish, but I'm trying to be the most take the most compassionate interpretation that I can.
See, you're much more noble than me, because I'm so past that point where I'm trying to be compassionate. I'm like in just rageful vengeance mode, I think.
I'm not saying I endorse the view. I'm saying
I get it. You're being descriptive.
I'm trying to explore it with you here, and and the thing is, like in the case of like Democracy Now, which is a place I know well because I worked there for 10 years.
Yeah.
Their top Russiagate guest was Marcy Wheeler.
Oh God. And we're gonna get deep into Marcy. Don't worry. That's on my Google Doc that I prepared for this discussion.
Now, but like I know Amy Goodman, and she has a ton of integrity.
Yeah. And I've been on the show.
You've been on the show, so I don't think what was motivating her there was financial considerations. There weren't donors. I know that for a fact because she has independence and she has integrity. I just think there was a lack of thinking. There was like, this was the dominant narrative. Trump is such a danger.
World historic fascist menace. That's obviously going to cloud your thinking if that's what you believe.
Yeah, and that if
you think he's going to bring about the collapse of civilization.
Yeah, I mean, if you buy into this belief that Trump is a singular threat, and which is a line that has been pushed,
and it's so wrong too, right? Because not only is he not a singular threat, he's been a weak president. Yeah. He's gotten little done. He's just spent 2 years at war with his intelligence agencies and his chief law enforcement apparatus.
Yeah, yeah.
Corey Robin has actually done a lot of good work exploring this, but even the New York Times has actually pointed out that Congress has wielded a lot more power in relation to Trump than had been the case for previous presidencies in the modern era, because Congress dictated the entire, the Republican Congress and Paul Ryan and McConnell basically dictated the entire first 2 terms of his agenda. Yeah. They didn't implement anything that was consistent with his 2016 messaging, which is why he's weak now going into re-election. Yeah.
Well, I do think he's a huge threat. I do, because by virtue of being a right-wing president in the White House, you're a threat to the world. I mean, as exemplified by him pulling out of the Paris Climate Accords, the Iran nuclear deal. He's done all these, but he's not a singular threat. Nor do I think we're living under the threat of fascism.
Right. He's not a singular. He's not a fascistic threat in the way that was popularly promoted.
Yeah.
He's a threat just in like the normal right wing.
Exactly. Exactly right. And Barack Obama was a threat to large parts of the world, but I wasn't crying and cowering in fear that he was the president.
Not our president. Yeah. Not our president. Nobody was trying to stage electoral college coups to block Obama, and now I'm told by these Irony Journal cowards that the electoral college coup attempt never happened. Even though I don't know, I seem to remember writing a column for the New York Daily News on it, because I went to a meeting of the electoral college in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania. Yeah. Which Trump won. He won Pennsylvania. And there were action alerts sent out by all these liberal organizations to flood the Capitol.
So just to explain to people, this was when the Electoral College was meeting to do its formal vote, right? That's how it works.
So for the entire 2.5 centuries of the American government, the Electoral College convening was always just a formality. It was always, it was never even an open question as to whether the electors, who when you vote for president, you're technically voting for electors. I mean, nobody thinks of it that way because it just never matters. Yeah. But there was this campaign waged in November to December of 2016.
Endorsed by the Hillary campaign, right?
Tacitly, I mean, Jennifer Palmieri, who was the communications director for Hillary, I don't know that they ever said, yeah, do it, but it was pretty much endorsed. Yeah, people got the message. Yeah, yeah. So you had Hillary campaign. I mean, I had the Medium post about it at the time. Now I'm being gaslit into saying this never happened. And I used to be really annoyed by the term gaslighting, but it's the only thing that describes what's going on right now. So I'm just going to go with it.
Michael, you are gaslit proof. You are gaslit proof. Come on.
But I feel like I have enough mental wherewithal to withstand it. But it's still they're trying to gaslight. Yeah. Because I covered it at the time. Yeah. Where you had people so Martin Sheen had this emergency celebrity montage put together where they were all gravely intoning, convince the electors not to seat Trump. And these were the same people that were complaining about norms, right? So Trump was going to be this norm violator, and that's why we had to stop him. And their solution to that was to just obliterate the norm governing how the Electoral College functioned, because again, there was never a situation where the electors were lobbied to not vote according to the popular vote outcome in their state. Yeah. It was just never an issue before.
Okay. Yeah.
But let me just. But so then, so I go to. So you had that. You had I'm going to just name a couple people who advocated this, and any of these Brooklyn irony freaks are listening, and it's not all Brooklyn, but I mean, I'm sure there are some in Queens, and there are a couple in D.C. or whatever. But if you were listening, go look it up. I'll send you the Medium post if you want it, all right? Lawrence Tribe, Paul Krugman.
Oh, yes.
Peter Beinart.
Yes.
Michael Moore.
Mm-hmm.
Is that enough for you to like tell you that this is a real thing? Or do I have to keep going down the list? Because I can, but I want to keep the podcast going. So it was a real move.
Yeah.
I mean, people were telling me, like, people were tweeting me and messaging me when this debate was going on about whether this happened. I mean, I guess I never wrote the column, even though I just looked it up and read it again today. But they were saying, yeah, I was getting all these action alerts emailed me to like show up to like Republican state capitals and protest and tell the electors they can't seat this Russia compromised menace.
Yes.
So anyway, I mean, I don't even remember why we got down that digression.
Well, my point about all this is that I look at these people as a combination of cynical frauds, like in the Democratic Party,
right,
and who know that Trump is not actually compromised by Russia, and who know that Trump won because Democratic neoliberals failed massively, both in their policies that Trump spoke out against and exploited the anger over, and also because there's their failures in running a horrible campaign.
Right.
But also people like, I don't know, imagine Michael Moore and Martin Sheen, and who mean well.
Rob Reiner. They're not
cynical frauds. They mean well. They think they're doing the right thing. You know what it is? I liken it to this. I've dealt with depression before. Mm-hmm. And in some of my lowest moments, I blamed other people for how bad I was feeling. Uh-huh. And my way of dealing with it was making it about other people, not about myself.
I've dealt with depression too, but I always blame myself.
Well, there you go. So we're different in that way. But what I'm saying is that is how I view Russiagate for a large sector of people, is that the Trump era sparked some really bad feelings because it was, it shattered their whole worldview. It shattered the people's worldview that Obama was a great president. Because how could these people vote against Obama's legacy? Right. How could they vote against the Clintons, these great people? So people, and so without knowing all the facts behind it, it had this emotional reaction, and Russiagate and this like view of Trump as being a singular fascist was comforting in that way, and so they got behind that. So I'm not saying that's universal, how everybody, but in the most compassionate way I can, that's how I explain it, and which I don't ascribe to everybody. There are some people who are just straight up cynical frauds, neocon, Cold War, peddling frauds, and I will happily call them out.
Sure.
And and it doesn't absolve anybody responsibility, but I'm trying to present a compassionate way of looking at some of this.
Yeah, here's my compassionate case, and I guess I will actually abide that, even though I've been raging against people for the past 9 days. Viciously, I have to say.
It's hard not to.
I know.
It's hard not to.
Really, I'm angry, and I am. And,
I get it.
But I'm trying to transmute my anger into something productive.
It's hard.
It's hard?
It's hard.
But I feel like if you're a casual news consumer, say you're vaguely liberal, you're not even that invested in what your like specific left factional orientation is.
Yeah.
You just like, you're down with whatever the mainstream Democratic line is, and you don't think about it that much. Maybe you're not paid to sit on Twitter all day or think about politics. You're just a normie. I don't blame you, because every single authoritative source that you rely on for information was feeding you the same bullshit.
We agree here. Totally.
So it's not your fault.
Yeah.
It's their fault.
100%.
And I hold them in contempt.
Yes.
But I was just going to mention about this electoral college thing. I went to that rally, right, on the day of the electoral college meeting in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and you had people who had showed up to protest, and they were saying, "We keep Russia out of the White House." These were the signs. I still have the photos. Trump and Putin, have launched a coup. Stop Trump, and they were trying to lobby the electors not to vote for Trump. So we went into the state capitol, and like there's a viewing area where you can watch the proceedings.
Yeah.
And I was sitting there, and like they were shouting and screaming and trying to interrupt. These were all like kind of mostly like middle-aged women liberals who, that seemed like it was a plurality of that type for whatever reason. Like probably the most fervent Hillary diehards.
Yeah.
But I'll never forget the moment that Trump was announced as the winner of the electoral college votes, which again would have just been a formality in any other year. Like nobody would have even been there.
Yeah.
This woman who was like sitting a couple seats next to me screamed out, "You just gave us Hitler."
Yeah.
So if that's your guiding assumption throughout all this,
Yeah.
that Trump is Hitler, literally,
Yeah.
then yeah, I mean, your critical faculties are obviously
Yeah.
something is seriously affecting the way that you're viewing the world, such that, of course, you're going to latch onto a scam like this.
Yes. I mean, see, the problem though is, I mean, one of the unfortunate things about that election for me was that, like, all of a sudden the Clintons became the poster people for stopping like misogyny and sexual assault, because Trump is a misogynist and committed sexual assault. He was accused at least by a number of women. So all of a sudden Hillary's campaign, because Hillary's a feminist,
Yeah, right.
she became all of a sudden so Trump's victory was traumatizing for anybody who's been the victim of misogyny or sexual assault. Unfortunately, it's like, no, but it's true. And like,
I don't know that you couldn't generalize for everybody.
Well,
saying that's the case, there are some, sure.
For at least for many women that I know, Trump's victory was, I mean,
deeply viscerally, they had a deep emotional visceral reaction.
And I couldn't fully understand that because I've never been the victim of any of that. You know what I mean? So it's like there are all these emotions tied up in that election. The Clintons were the worst possible opponents because on top of being just awful people with terrible policies.
Also, like, Hillary covered up
exactly right.
her husband doing similar stuff.
Doing worse stuff.
Worse stuff. Rape.
Bill's a rapist. Yeah.
Outright rape.
So, but the fact of the matter doesn't change that was the emotional weight attached to Trump's victory. And so,
remember that debate when they brought in Bill's victims?
Yeah.
That was the most raw, uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's just like, what are we watching right now? That was
there's
almost unbearable.
It underscored that there's just no issue that the Clintons are not like flagrant hypocrites on. Not even sexual assault, in which Bill Clinton is worse than Donald Trump, which is unbelievable. But
and Hillary, like, I wrote about this for Vice at the time. I wrote a column about it. People got really angry, of course. But like, I went through and read like the Starr report.
Yeah.
Which is like has some relevance now in terms of this Mueller report that's going to come out. But one of the things that they kind of document, and you could read stuff that contemporaneously at the time, was that Hillary basically, she used public resources. She used White House resources to smear Monica Lewinsky.
Oh yeah, which is not the first woman who the Clintons have gone after, and Hillary Clinton played a big role in that. Yeah. So. But going back to your point about our,
why we're talking about Monica
lefty progressive outlets
let's get
are
that.
more culpable than like MSNBC and the Washington Post. I mean,
I was just laying out the argument. I'm not saying I endorse that necessarily.
I'd say it's like sadder to me. It's really sad to me that like Democracy Now!'s top guest on Russiagate was Marcy Wheeler.
Yeah. That
like even before the election they were having on Kurt Eichenwald to talk about how like Trump's ties to Russia were a threat to national security, that The Intercept felt compelled to, compensate for the fact that it had Glenn Greenwald's awesome journalism by hiring James Risen.
Singularly important analysis that like could not be replicated by anybody.
No, and they felt compelled to hire James Risen and then like take advantage of like a fear-mongering opportunity with that NSA Reality Winner story, and obviously that's saying nothing about like the Young Turks, and then you get into Vox obviously, and
Mother Jones kind of mutated into this corrupt,
insane
like propaganda organ.
Yeah. So when you look at all these cases, it's hard to ascribe it to one factor. So what you said about opportunism, I think that's there. I also think we have to just put on our most compassionate hats and look at to what extent were people just really confused and not just thinking straight?
I think a lot of them were very confused, but just like, you got to get over it at some point, right? I mean, it's just like, I feel like if you're that emotionally wrecked by a political event and you're a journalist, it's just like, find a different line of work or something, dude.
Well, that's, unfortunately, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how we get.
And I never even used the word dude. I don't know why I did that, but go on.
I thought it was totally appropriate. It's going to be interesting to see how, as we push for accountability now, from like New York Times and the Washington Post.
And it's only just beginning.
From the Washington Post and obviously MSNBC. It's awkward because like we also, if we're being honest and consistent, we're also going to need it from The Intercept and from Democracy Now! And some colleagues of mine at The Nation and, all these, everybody bought into it. So it's like, it's a bit awkward for everybody.
And that's why I brought up these like indifferent irony journal guys. It's just because, you know, they were kind of so they want to pose as having been skeptics all along right now, and they resent anybody who gets quote credit or quote gloating, or who won't quote move on.
Yeah.
But they never engaged with the substance of the narrative.
Yeah.
They never took any risk. They might like the most they might have done is sent an ironic tweet about Louise Mensch every now and then. And I just feel like, no, you aren't quote right. You were like almost it was almost immoral for you to be so indifferent to a story that was so dominant and that suffused American politics in such an inescapable way and caused long-lasting damage to the body politic that we probably won't ever recover from. I mean, this is a monumental event.
I don't fault those who failed to challenge it. I just don't. I challenge those who peddled it, which there are plenty beyond Rachel Maddow, and I fault those who have institutional security, who knew it was bullshit but said nothing, and said nothing as colleagues and friends peddled it. I think those people, should reckon with what they tacitly took part in. The people, I'm not sure what ironic tweeters like you're talking about, but I just it doesn't strike me as like they're not. I mean,
but here's the thing: I question the judgment of anybody who is again in the media, who was paid to analyze and report on politics, who said to themselves, I'm just going to ignore this for 3 years. I don't really care. The most I'll weigh in is, I'll do this kind of pose of ironic indifference every now and then. Yeah, it's just a sensibility that's very dominant in New York. So, and in other places, but it's just like, so why would if you lived during the Vietnam War, okay? Yeah. And I'm not likening the scale of the death or disruption of the Vietnam War, but okay. But you just said, "Oh, I'm going to sit this one out." Whatever. But
the fact is, people do that. I mean, like I can tell you. I mean, I've been very involved in the Israel-Palestine issue pretty much my whole adult life, and I remember there was a long time when it wasn't. There were career consequences for saying something about it.
Sure.
And I've even limited what I said about it sometimes when I was up for a job or something like that. Like I was applying for a job at Vice once.
Oh.
And so I remember sort of scaling back a bit what I would have said otherwise. I still said some great stuff, I think, but I scaled. But I remember tempering what I was saying because I was up for a position. I didn't want to tweet that week about how I really felt. So what I'm saying is that dynamic predates Russiagate, and it hits almost everybody. And
I just think that the fact that there are so few of us who are on this story from a skeptical perspective to the point that we're now been labeled this caucus or something.
It's funny. I think it's very funny.
It is funny, but it's also such a damning indictment that there are so few.
Yeah.
Like that it now has kind of
this is where I
coalesce into this recognizable group. It's itself an indictment.
This is where I fault editors because editors are in a position of authority to delegate resources and make choices. So I can tell you from my own experience. Back early on in Russiagate, I wrote to Betsy Reed, the head of The Intercept, and I was like, this whole thing is bullshit.
Right.
This is a scam. The Intercept
is just going to get worse if we don't do anything to rebut it.
The Intercept is a leading adversarial site, should be leading the skepticism and the pushback. And Glenn's columns are amazing, but why not? You have
it's not enough.
You have a billionaire funder.
Right.
You have infinite resources. Let's do something.
You have this absurdly nice office and the most expensive real estate in the country in Manhattan.
Everything, and I got basically ignored, and they went and hired James Risen. So it's
you did contribute the Maddow piece to them.
Right? I wrote the Maddow piece, but then I think I don't know. I never was welcome in their spaces again.
Yeah,
and
I wrote one piece for them, and then I got a feeling I probably wouldn't be welcome again.
Yeah, I mean now, and
I don't care, frankly.
I cared because I like The Intercept, and
so do I,
and I like the people there, and I thought it was such a waste of their entire mission to be not just not challenging Russiagate with the exception of Glenn over whom they have no control, but even peddling it with James
and
Risen.
Developing a resentment toward Glenn to the point that they had to take steps to counteract him. That's why I'm saying I question the judgment of these people on a fundamental level.
It's totally cowardly, and everyone should be given a chance to explain themselves. And I hope, as part of the media accountability that, of course, will never happen, that people in positions there, and not just at The Intercept, I shouldn't single them out, but everywhere that bought into it, why didn't Brian Stelter have any of us on his show reliable sources? Or
and it's so weird when we say that, because
why didn't MSNBC interview anybody since Matt Taibbi in early 2017?
Yeah. It's just and then when people hear you say that, they're going to say, "Oh, you're just complaining that you didn't get invited on the cool TV shows or whatever." It's just no, it's not about that. And the fact that there was such a small pool of people to choose from is also, again, a very damning indictment of just this wider media dynamic. There should have been a full roster of people that you could select from that coming from all facets of the media and political world to give you a sane perspective on this, but there were just almost none. And the few that were available, like R5 or whatever it is, became toxic.
I know, which is so funny because I was on a podcast the other day and they called me controversial, and they didn't mean that.
What podcast was that?
It was Pod Damn America, is what it's called.
Oh.
And and they didn't mean it pejoratively, but I just thought it was hilarious.
What controversial views have I am I in favor of killing babies or something?
Exactly. Just think about how funny it is that we were marginalized and considered toxic and controversial because we questioned the basis for claiming that there was a conspiracy between reality TV show host Donald Trump and the Russian government.
Right.
If anything, anybody who espouses that view should be treated with skepticism and should be deemed controversial.
So the promoters of the deranged militaristic conspiracy theory, they didn't do anything controversial. They were just normal.
Yeah. That's respectable and mainstream. It's respectable and mainstream to go on TV and wonder if Donald Trump is controlled by the president of Russia.
Yeah,
but it's somehow
super normal to say that Donald Trump has been compromised since 1987. It was part of a grand plot to overthrow the American government.
Yeah. But it underscores that media does not work to look at facts honestly and assess them rationally. Media exists to, at least mainstream media, and unfortunately, in the case of Russiagate, even beyond mainstream media, exists to reinforce narratives that reinforce privilege and protect the interests of privilege, and that's how throughout Russiagate it's behaved.
And there are aspects of this that I was thinking back on recently that just when they happened, the way that we perceive them being so divergent from how they were perceived by the overwhelming majority made us feel I felt crazy at times. I thought that I was losing my wits because how I was thinking about things was just so remarkably different from how the most people were seeing things. And you got to fix your mic because it fell down on your shirt a little bit. So I'm breaching the podcast fourth wall here, but an example of that would be when. So I was at the Democratic convention, right? And it was sometime during the convention, Trump gave his infamous press conference where it was just like a wild rant for most of it. But he said, Russia, if you're listening, I hope you can find the 30,000 however many it was, 33,000 emails that Hillary deleted.
Yeah.
And it's just at the time, I thought it would have been impossible to mistake that for anything other than an obvious joke and a trolling attempt.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
How could you watch that where he's in front of every TV camera in the country and say that he was just getting on TV and revealing a conspiracy?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're conspiring, don't you keep that secret?
Yeah.
But it's gotten to the point where even now, approaching 3 years later, that moment is still cited on montages where they say this is proof of collusion.
Yes, I know.
It's utterly bonkers. And that's why, when I see that, there were times where it occurred to me that, I don't know, maybe I'm just undergoing cognitive decline and I don't, do I have, premature Alzheimer's or something? Yeah. What is going on here?
Yeah.
There are so many examples of that where it's just wow, how stupid is this?
I never felt crazy. I felt a combination of either I would laugh so hard at what was being presented on TV as presented as being sober and serious. I'd listen to all these podcasts, The Daily from the New York Times, when the Michael Barber would be the president, might be compromised by Russia, and like
That's a good impression.
They'd all like debate all this with like this like seriousness.
Yeah,
taking all this seriously.
very grave. We have to protect our institutions
when it's all just a scam.
Yeah. You're gravely and you're speaking in hushed tones about what is fundamentally a scam.
A scam, and they're all blatantly getting all the facts wrong. Mm-hmm. I thought that was a combination of hilarious and then also just sad. And it was sad to me when I would see, people I respect parrot it. Like Democracy Now. Like I would turn on DN, and they'd have on Marcy Wheeler, and I'd be like. It was like, what is going on?
Yeah, we got to get into Marcy.
What is going on? And so that part was, but it blew my mind at how this took hold and how predominant this got. But I knew always that it couldn't sustain itself. The investigation had to end at some point, and I think now with Mueller now turning in his verdict and saying. He did not establish a conspiracy. I do think it's a new chapter now, and it's a opportunity for people who bought into it to do some reflection. And I'm hoping we can help spark that. But it's just tough for us because we were so right and we were so marginalized for it, and
the hatred has increased.
The hatred has increased.
We were quote, proven right.
Yeah.
But somehow that has led to even more intensified hatred.
Yeah,
so what's going on there?
I know. Well, that's what you do when
granted, I'm not going to deny that I've been provocative, okay, and I'm trying to
it's hard not to
hammer the point home with certain people in ways that could come off as abrasive.
Yeah.
So I fully admit that, but I would argue that it's well-founded.
It is, yes, it is well-founded, and it's hard, especially on Twitter, which is so conducive to gloating and like making fun of people. It's hard
dunking
not to
on
take
people,
part, especially after it's like we're only like 2 weeks since
I dunked on that guy David Pakman today.
I saw that.
I mean, I almost felt bad for that one. Because, so he's this, progressive YouTube guy, and I don't even care about him that much. I would never watch the show.
Yeah.
It's just utterly boring and banal to me.
Yeah.
But it's just one example of these so-called progressive online guys who, maybe he wants an MSNBC show at some point. Like, he's like a Sam Seder type or something. And he's saying, I wasn't proven wrong about Russiagate. And I go and the first video that I check out was from after the Helsinki summit.
Yeah.
And he made this affirmative declaratory statement where he said, okay, now we know for sure that the U.S. government is controlled by Putin.
Yeah.
He left no wiggle room there.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm just okay, maybe this is sort of like a minor person to hold accountable, but nonetheless.
I think it is.
Yeah, it is, right? But nonetheless, it warranted a tweet.
It totally warranted a tweet, and it's and the gifts keep on giving. Like there's so many, people came after me, and I couldn't believe they're coming after me when it's people who wrote stuff about how serious the Trump-Russia controversy was, and how can the left ignore Trump's obvious deference to Putin and, all the serious questions here. It's amazing to me that people who bought into it were then attacking those of us who got it right.
Yeah.
But,
I also hate that formulation that people do is why the left should care about X. It's just how about why rational people should care about what's true?
Yeah.
I don't care what quote the left should do or the right should do. I want to know what's true.
Well, I do care about what the left should do.
I guess I do, but
I do. But it's certainly everyone who has ever prescribed something in the name of that, I've never been like, oh yeah, that person's right about, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
so
it's just you should be able to make a rational case, and then other people, if they're rational, will agree with the case you make.
Yeah.
Rather than flavoring it with this whole kind of melodramatic, ideological.
Yes. Yeah.
Annoying.
And it's usually an excuse to adopt an actual anti-left position.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Why the left should care about adopting this anti-progressive sellout position.
No, John, I was dunking on Jonathan Chait today for good reason again, but I went back and read part of his 2002 cover story in the New Republic, which was basically the liberal case for invading Iraq.
Yeah.
And it was the same type of thing. Why liberals should support X. In that case, it was the Iraq War. And then flash forward 16 years later, he writes a cover story literally positing that Trump was a Russian agent going back to 1987.
Yes. And the craziest part is that he just published a new piece saying that
he was right.
Was right.
Yeah. I was proven right. It's just literally, I usually don't reply to just the account, the Twitter accounts of publications because it's kind of weird.
Yeah.
But I couldn't help myself in just replying, You have to be fucking kidding me.
Yeah, and that's my problem here. I'm not articulate enough to describe how fucking insane it is that A, these people argued all this to begin with,
right?
And B, are now doubling down on it, standing by it. Like, I don't have the words for it. And
I've located one guy who is not doubling down, who's actually admitted fault.
Who's that?
Well, I did it on my for my second podcast episode. This guy he's Jordan Uhl on Twitter. Okay. Jordan Uhl, UHL. You may have seen him. He's like a left progressive whatever activist type.
Yeah.
And he was integral in organizing this March for Truth in 2017.
Oh, you know what? By the way, for anyone who hasn't seen it, Google Max Blumenthal's video from the March for Truth. Right. He went to that, and
Jamie Raskin.
And he interviewed Congressmember Jamie Raskin.
Yes.
So you spoke to this guy.
So I spoke to him because we had been had Twitter spats, and we just had fought for like 2+ years.
Yeah.
And and people will know this if they listen to the previous episode, right? But after the Barr letter, I basically just went and checked his feed, and I saw he was just kind of like,
my bad.
No, he didn't say my bad. Yeah. He was doing he made one tweet that was like mildly mocking of Rachel Maddow. And I'm like, okay, so now you are going to posture as having been a skeptic of this when you were literally an organizer of a rally, a nationwide day of action in 2017 that helped to spawn the most deranged conspiratorial lunacy that I've ever seen in my life. And now, because of how the facts have turned out, you're going to say you're a skeptic. So I just went after him pretty hard. But then we ended up having a private conversation. He admitted, and then it turned into a podcast. He admitted he was wrong. He admitted fault. He said he shouldn't have done what he did. He regretted organizing the rally.
Okay.
And I'm like, wow. Oh, wait.
Wow.
All right.
We're
getting somewhere. Right. Fantastic. Yeah, the only problem is he's the only guy.
Yeah.
Everybody else, they're not going to entertain any kind of admission of wrongdoing.
I could get into who I think disingenuously attacked me, who has a blue check mark, but
go ahead, let's do it.
Well, I don't know. Is it someone like Ryan Cooper, who
he's the guy who's gaslighting me about this electoral college stuff with Mehdi Hassan on his podcast.
Mehdi declared that. I mean, I admittedly came at Mehdi first, but not personally at him, at his argument, because he was doing something that I thought was peddling the Russiagate, preoccupation, and so I came at him and, pointed out what I thought the facts he was missing, and he declared he didn't take me seriously. He called me a troll, which he apologized for.
He blocked me recently.
Yeah. I mean, but then he got some pushback from people, and he had me on his Al Jazeera show to debate David K. Johnston, which I appreciated. But Ryan Cooper Ryan Cooper basically tried to he tweeted out a link to my articles at The Nation and said something about basically accusing me of being a hypocrite for saying that Russiagate distracted from important issues.
Because you focused on
Russiagate. He's leaving out.
You focused on rebutting the central political narrative of the past 3 years. I mean, how dare you?
Which he was buying into,
right?
And and which had hugely dangerous consequences,
right?
And so and also he also ignored the fact that when I had a day job throughout this period at The Real News where I was hosting videos. And I covered so many things aside from Russiagate. And I also was saying, well, fuck, even if I hadn't.
Yeah.
Even if my only thing
totally had been justified.
Because we were right.
You probably should have not covered that other stuff and just focused even more exclusively on,
There's an argument for that. I mean, it was weird to be put. It's like you were making me defend coverage that
it's insane.
Turned
it's
out to
gaslighting.
Be correct. Yeah. I mean.
It really is.
Yeah.
What he did to me is, so eventually he got super annoyed that I was getting, quote, credit, right? So a lot of this is jealousy.
Yeah.
And honestly, people, you have nothing to be jealous about with my situation. I'm not living a life of luxury, I can assure you. But he got obviously, resentful and petty, and he said, oh, Michael Tracey he's the wrong one. He was wrong about this. So he went back to my tweets from 2016 and said, he said there was going to be, Democrats were going to try to do an electoral college coup, and he was wrong about that. I just gave you firsthand documentary pictorial evidence that it happened. I was physically there. I can name you all these hugely, influential Democratic figures who said that they wanted to do this.
Yeah.
Lawrence Tribe wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post saying the Electoral College should elect Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
And they're saying I was actually the wrong one.
Yeah.
It's just like...
Well,
you have to be kidding me.
This is a case where careerism had to play a factor for many people. And people who, and the problem is, especially if part of your brand is being edgy and adversarial, people who are, also being adversarial in a way that makes you look like a sellout or soft are going to be a threat. And that's what I think explains so much of the contempt that people who brand themselves as being edgy and adversarial have for people like us, because we expose them to be like credulous Kool-Aid drinkers, which is bad for their brand.
We expose them as being susceptible to just regurgitating these establishment conspiracy narratives that anybody with half a brain should have been able to see through from the very second. I mean, seriously, the whole Trump joke at that press conference, and that right away didn't tell you that this was an obvious farce. And again, I question your basic analytical abilities in a way that I almost now can't even read anything that guy writes without thinking, okay, if he fell for that scam,
but here's I'm not sure if this is a fair analog or not, but Saul Bellow, I love his fiction. Awful politics. So
what is politics? I don't even think I know.
Oh, Saul Bellow was like a right-wing, pro, anti-Palestinian.
Okay.
Neocon.
Like Tom Wolfe would be another example.
A neocon. I think he even supported the Iraq War. But I love his fiction. Now one could argue there.
Yeah, sure.
Exactly. But
I know.
You are reading Saul Bellow for his
fiction
politics.
versus nonfiction is like you're crossing.
But I guess I don't know. It's just it's a question of how charitable you want to be. I certainly think there needs to be a reckoning, and no one can be let off the hook. And the reckoning we're all demanding from MSNBC and CNN has to apply to our progressive colleagues too. It's a hard battle, man, because I know there's still 5 or 6 of us.
I'm at the point where my disdain for them is so it's just reached such a level where I don't even know that I conceive of them as colleagues so much anymore. I feel like I'm almost in my relationship to them has just fundamentally changed, where that's just not the way that I perceive myself vis-a-vis them anymore. It's just
however I perceive them, I do recognize that we're in the same ecosystem, and we need to, it's and tactically it's a question of how many enemies do you want to make. You know what I mean?
For me, there's no limit. Apparently,
there's no limit.
I have 5 guys who like me, and that's about it. But that's enough, So we've been exhaustively going through all the horrendously abhorrent failures here, but the nation, which, and I mentioned this on Twitter yesterday, ought to be singled out for bravely resisting a lot of the pressure that was applied to especially Katrina, the editor and publisher, and her husband, who's been indispensable in putting, again, engaging with the substance every step of the way. Marshaling his longstanding expertise in a way that obviously imbued him with extreme authority. I had him on the Young Turks multiple times, and I know, quote, colleagues, and I shouldn't have said that sarcastically, but whatever, weren't particularly thrilled by it.
Of course not.
But I hope I can lay claim to having the first denunciation of David Corn in a progressive venue, because I made a point to interview him, I guess on our first interview, about the failings of the progressive media, and this was in early 2017.
Listen,
and David Corn was the target of our ire in that segment.
You and Professor Cohen are probably the OG skeptics, because because you were pushing back on this publicly on Twitter, maybe elsewhere, in the summer 2016, and people like me didn't come along until later on. I think after Trump was elected and this started blowing up into even more of a thing. And so, Professor Cohen has been maligned and attacked basically because he's an expert in Russia and because he takes Russia seriously. He doesn't cater to this cartoonish portrayal of Vladimir Putin and Russia that has become so prevailing across the media spectrum.
And he's rightly, I think, offended by those cartoonish
Of course he is.
portrayals.
Yeah,
Because
of
it just
course he is.
cuts against
Yeah.
his decades of expertise.
Yeah, and he also has seen, the real he's seen people in Russia and the Soviet Union pay the price for being dissidents, and he's seen journalists. He's known some journalists who've been killed there. He knows that things that are blamed on Vladimir Putin are not actually the fault of Vladimir Putin.
Right.
Not to say that.
Not to excuse those things.
Not
right?
to excuse, no, but what I'm saying is he's seen a cartoonish portrayal develop of Vladimir Putin and Russia that doesn't reflect the reality of it that he knows, and so for that he's been maligned and even attacked internally at the nation because he refused to cater to like what we're all supposed to believe about Putin and Russia. Not because anybody in the establishment in the U.S. cares about human rights in Russia, but because demonizing Russia is convenient for the bipartisan foreign policy consensus, and it helps, justify this notion we have of American exceptionalism.
And it was a convenient pretext to launch these unprecedented actions against Trump from within the security apparatus.
Yep. Which we still don't know the full story.
We still don't know the full story, but I talked about that with Taibbi in the previous podcast. It's just the story. The more you learn about it, the crazier it gets.
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
And I think it's just going to get crazier.
One aspect that I think is worth thinking about is Michael Flynn and his ouster. It might be worth. I can't prove this yet, but it might be worth considering. What happened to him. The circumstances surrounding his departure are questionable.
Yeah. He lied to Mike Pence.
He lied to Mike Pence, and he was interviewed by the FBI, not knowing he was under investigation, not with a lawyer present.
And they came to him in the White House.
In the White House, and if you look at what he lied about,
it was inconsequential.
It's so inconsequential, but yet this was deemed to be sufficient to try to oust him. And there were, the White House was warned he was possibly compromised by Russia, vulnerable to blackmail. So you have to think about, well, why was that? So maybe. Michael Flynn is a little kooky. So, and
I wrote about this at the time of the Young Turks when I was just like railing against Russiagate and they wanted me to do other stuff, but I didn't care and just did that. But I remember I actually went back and read some of the pieces that were on the Young Turks Medium page that I wrote at the time. That's where they were publishing stuff. And the headline was basically Mike Flynn just got fired for the stupidest possible reason.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, Mike Flynn is really a deranged hawk on Iran, for example.
Yeah.
But he didn't resign for that.
Yeah.
He resigned because he ostensibly had a conversation with Sergei Kislyak saying, hold off on any retaliatory actions after Obama imposed these last-minute sanctions, and we'll revisit it when we enter office in 12 days or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And that was somehow this major offense?
Yeah, no, especially because, and we all knew about that because those calls were leaked and intercepted. Unprecedented. So obviously somebody in the obvious import from
we still don't know who did that.
We don't know who did it, but what we can deduce from it is that somebody in the national security state wanted to get Mike Flynn, given the fact that his calls were his conversations with the Russian ambassador were leaked, and that he was investigated by the FBI and questioned, and then accused of perjury and all that. So, the question is why? Now, maybe it was some noble FBI folks who were scared about his Iran agenda and wanted to stop it. Nah. Or, somehow I doubt that. I also know that Michael Flynn was critical of the CIA program in Syria and the arming of the insurgents there. And he wanted to, and he was instrumental in trying to wind that down. He also was at the DIA back when the Defense Intelligence Agency undercut the case for bombing Syria because it produced a report saying that it wasn't just Assad that had sarin. So, and I think that there was some bitterness to him. So, again, I don't know the exact reason why Michael Flynn was targeted, but it is quite possible. Maybe it was because he was an Iran hawk and someone wanted to stop that. It's also possible somebody wanted to stop his views that were antithetical to the regime change wing of the national security state.
Trump espoused some of those same views all on the campaign trail.
Yeah, and getting rid of Michael Flynn was a good way to undercut that. So listen, I'm not endorsing.
But Trump then did stop the CIA program in Syria.
He did early on. He did. He
summer of 2017.
Yeah, he did it. Now, one could argue then that no matter who would have come into power, that would have stopped because they realized even under Obama they knew it was a lost cause. It was over.
Well, then why didn't they stop it under Obama?
Well, because they were well, maybe,
I don't think if Hillary had been elected, it necessarily would have been stopped. I don't think that's anywhere near a given.
I'm not saying it's a given. I'm saying you can't rule it out. Yeah. Although, of course,
that's true.
I mean, it depends. I mean, if John Brennan had stayed on as CIA director, it's quite possible, yes, he would have fought to keep it because that was something he was very adamant about. So I don't know. I'm just saying there were so many different possibilities. You can't rule out the extent to which there was just a lot of internal upheaval inside the elite structure of people like Michael Flynn versus more traditional pro-interventionist hawks. Like it's strange. We don't know the full story, but there's. Well,
I don't know if you're aware of this, but Chris Christie had a book out recently, and Christie was in charge of the Trump transition operation until shortly. I think it was just after the election when Jared Kushner had him fired, like he shivved him.
Sure.
Because Christie prosecuted his dad, right?
Yeah.
So, like, months and months of work that Christie did to prepare for the incoming administration, like to staff it, with all the personnel and stuff, was just literally thrown in dumpsters. So Kushner really got him back good. But one thing that he talked about on his book tour was how he was constantly advising Trump to get rid of Flynn. He said, Flynn is dangerous.
Yeah.
He's going to be misbehaving. People don't like him.
That's just true. That's true. He had a bad
because Trump wanted to bring, I have to double check this, but I believe Christie said Trump was insistent that he bring Flynn to the first intelligence briefings that he received as nominee. Because once you formally become the major party nominee, you're entitled to get these intelligence briefings. And apparently there was one meeting where Flynn was there with Trump.
Yeah.
And according to Christie, like, Flynn acted up or something, or he acted in a way that the briefers didn't like.
Yeah.
So I wonder what sequence of events that may have set into motion. I mean, we don't know. There's still so much we don't know.
Yeah.
We've been so immersed in this for almost 3 years, and yet there's still so many unanswered questions. It's like a...
Well, yeah. I mean, as you talked about with Matt Taibbi, we don't even know how Russiagate started.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? That's insane.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So let's I don't know how to introduce this, but I think we need to talk about Marcy. You know that there's like a movie like we need to talk about Kevin because Kevin is like this murderous child who the family doesn't want to discuss.
Yeah. And
I just feel like we have to talk about her because for the longest time she got away with, I think, and I'm trying to be as reserved as possible in my description of this, but for a very long time she was allowed to get away without scrutiny with a journalistic breach that she publicly proclaimed, an ethical breach that she publicly announced, and nobody even bothered to apply even minimal scrutiny to her claims.
Yeah, no one did. So just to explain, she came out publicly and said that she had outed a source to the FBI because she believed that this source played a significant role in the Russian attack on the election.
And she believed...
Her words, by the way. I'm not endorsing the word attack. I'm saying, but those are her words.
Well, and she justified her doing this on the basis that she almost felt like this patriotic zeal to get retribution against Russia for their, quote, attack on America or attack on the United States. And remember, by attack on the United States, what she's referring to is some Twitter trolls, some Facebook memes, and some spearfish Gmail accounts.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe there's some other stuff that like she could argue is relevant there, but those are like the core factors, apparently.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Gerald Nadler was talking about when he said it was like Pearl Harbor.
Yeah. Yeah.
So like she had this, she had this swell of patriotic pride where she said she had to go and commit one of the most mortal sins that a journalist can ever commit, which is that you don't give up your sources. Yeah. And then she said and then she also said that she was in possession of smoking gun information that would prove a Trump-Russia quid pro quo or conspiracy.
I believe her I saw some tweet recently from where she said she had offered to turn over evidence of collusion to the House Judiciary Committee, but they weren't interested. And she was lamenting that fact. I mean, see, my problem is I feel like I've talked enough about Marcy, only in the sense because I've fought with her so much on Twitter.
Yeah.
And, I had her on for a bunch of really cordial discussions on The Real News when I was there. And, And I like Marcy. Like, I think she's funny. She's very well researched. You know, she's
extremely skilled.
She's very skilled. She's
as a researcher. There's no doubt about that.
But I guess in terms, and now it's like to talk about her now, it's like her conspiracy theory has been so discredited. All her predictions have failed. She, talked constantly about how Mueller was going to get everybody. She would like map out everything that Mueller was. She would speak as if she knew what Mueller was doing, and Mueller was laying out this grand conspiracy case.
Yeah,
and then he comes back and says, "I did not establish that there was." So it's like.
But here's what bothered me, right? She was always dropping these cryptic hints about the information that she had, which was going to prove, that her whole approach here was valid. And when anybody would ask her, like you or me, I think we were the only ones, frankly. Like when anyone would challenge her to, provide, elaborate or elucidate on the information that she would have, she would just berate you.
Yeah, yeah.
And she would say, "Oh, just wait."
Yeah.
Okay, we waited.
Well, or she would or she would claim that the evidence exists in the public record.
But then she wouldn't cite the information.
And she wouldn't directly cite it. It was really, but yet, again, as I said, the problem is she could get away. She was enabled because she was treated with such reverence by, like she was on MSNBC all the time. She was on Democracy Now. So and she was published in The Intercept and interviewed on.
She contributed columns to the New York Times.
There we go. So it's like when you're treated with this level of
deference,
then it's just like it and there's no consequences for even like not making any sense and not being able to substantiate your claims.
She claimed that in the post where she revealed that she had gone to the FBI, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that she also coordinated with Mueller in some way because she wanted to check with them to make sure that what she was saying wouldn't compromise the investigation, right?
Yeah.
As if like the Mueller, Robert Mueller was like, "Oh my God, Marcy, you're gonna mess up our entire investigation if you come out with this," right? As if that was ever a plausible possibility.
Yeah.
But in that post, she says that part of the reason why I'm doing this is because I could be killed.
Yeah.
By Russians or Trump, like some sinister combination of pro-Trump and pro-Russia forces, I guess. It's just like, okay, where is this hit squad that you're saying was out there? Did anything come of that?
Yeah.
So it's like, but that wasn't a red flag for anybody.
No, it wasn't because to begin with, this notion that there was a conspiracy between Trump and Russia was treated with such seriousness, even though like no one ever could explain what the actual evidentiary basis for it was. No one could think about the implications of the fact that like the tip that supposedly started the entire probe from George Papadopoulos led absolutely nowhere. But yet we were still supposed to take all this seriously. And so anybody who, even if they said the most outlandish shit, it just became this culture where anything could go. I had the tweet here I referenced earlier. Marcy said in July of 2018 on Twitter, "I made informal offers to discuss the hard evidence of collusion I have in my possession with House Judiciary Committee staffers."
So think about that. She's claiming that she personally, Marcy,
has hard evidence
alone possesses the smoking gun evidence that's going to establish the Trump-Russia conspiracy.
Yeah, I mean,
And that is just... To say it's loony is like...
So this is why, I mean, the significance of Marcy now, aside from...
And by the way, Mueller finding no conspiracy, I mean, she can rationalize it however she wants, and I'm sure she will, but that obliterates everything that she said.
Well, what they're saying now is that the Mueller's mandate confined it to Russian government interference, and so maybe Mueller found that Trump was complicit with some like Russian cutouts or some Russian oligarchs.
So after 22 months... of intensive investigation to the point that people's lives were ruined.
Yeah.
However many search warrants were issued, and the manpower and resources that went into this were unlimited. I mean, they had the full U.S. Treasury behind them.
Yeah.
For 22 months, these prosecutors worked full time just on this, and they were some of the most aggressive prosecutors in the entire country.
Yeah.
And
they got Paul Manafort in prison for an unrelated bank and tax.
Yeah, great job.
That was the sum of this entire thing.
And they had like a weird, like dramatic subplot with Jerome Corsi.
Yeah, exactly.
It's just like when Jerome Corsi who's like a cognitively decrepit crank.
Yeah.
When he became the investigative focus,
It's such a joke.
it's just like that didn't tip you guys off that there was something fundamentally wrong with all this. Like, what is wrong with you?
If you Google Chris Hayes, Randy Credico, there's like a monologue from Chris Hayes on his MSNBC show about how like Randy Credico, and is Randy Credico the intermediary between WikiLeaks and Roger Stone, and that's the Trump campaign. I mean, Randy Credico is like a comedian with a show on WBAI. He's kooky. He's really funny. Does great impressions. But it was, this whole thing was so dumb that we had to entertain the stupidest notions possible.
Randy Credico is a guy I remember like as a gadfly at Occupy Wall Street. That's when I first encountered him. Yeah. Like he was one of those guys.
I remember him because he used to send like emails to Democracy Now! When I worked there, being like, why aren't you guys covering this? And but again, all these in this kooky conspiracy theory, all these kooky characters became plausible as being central players.
All these nobodies that got elevated. Yeah. It's insane. Yeah. Like Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Jerome Corsi, even Roger Stone is like. I get it that he was a Trump advisor for a long time, but the idea that he was this hugely consequential, like mythical figure or something.
He like the fact that even after Roger Stone was indicted, and the indictment makes clear he has no contacts to WikiLeaks whatsoever, and he's basically indicted for lying to Congress about his failed efforts to contact WikiLeaks. That's what he's basically indicted for. But yet, still the coverage is Roger Stone, the intermediary.
And Marcy was saying that. Marcy was saying that Mueller was intentionally hiding information.
Oh yes, that's right.
Right? Because he was saving it for the ultimate round of indictments that were going to pertain to the conspiracy and we're going to implicate Trump personally.
Yes, of course. That's when you're a conspiracy theorist, literally nothing.
Not falsifiable. No evidence is countervailing. It's all confirmatory.
Everything works for you. If the information is not there, great. That's just more evidence that Mueller is hiding the real goods because he doesn't want to tip off.
It reminds me of a doomsday cult.
Yeah,
like
that's what it was.
When you say that doomsday is going to come on X date, and it doesn't come, you say, oh, that means God's plan was it's going to come at this next date. And that's how their epistemological framework functioned here. And that's why you say you like Marcy. Okay, fine. I mean, I'm sure she has some endearing qualities. And again, I followed her work for a long time. That's just why her conduct here is so shocking and tragic. And I tried to discuss it on Sam Cedar before he had a hissy fit. And interrupted me every 5 seconds, and it was really, truly pathetic. But my belief is we have to be serious about what she did here.
Well, I guess my only thing is I just don't want to give her too much. I don't want to give her too much attention because I feel like she's gotten enough already.
But not in the direction that she should be getting it. She's been getting all laudatory attention.
But I also don't want to blame. I don't want to I want to be fair in apportioning blame.
But here's the thing: she colored a huge amount of the perceptions of this story. I think because here's an example that might seem trivial, but. So I listen to the 538 podcast occasionally just because I want to hear what Nate Silver has to say. I don't care about his sidekicks. They're really horrible. They should just have like Nate talk. But like whenever they would bring up the Russia issue, Nate would be like, "Oh, but Marcy Wheeler says this." So, like she would be his main source of information on Russiagate. Now Nate Silver is a hugely influential person.
It's true. She was cited a lot. I remember like there was an article in The Nation. I forgot by who. That it was a line like the brilliant Marcy Wheeler. And she was published. Listen, she definitely.
She's in the New York Times.
It's true.
Like, how much farther up can you get?
And the Washington Post too, actually. I think. Yeah.
I mean, when she first came out with that bombshell admission that she committed to one of the worst sins that any journalist can ever commit, and you would usually destroy your career immediately. Margaret Sullivan in the Washington Post wrote this glowing profile about how brave
a journalist
was moved by her conscience. And like she wrote, and then when she wrote that Marcy thought she was going to be killed, Margaret Sullivan was like, "Well, she's not wrong, knowing how Russians are." It was just, it's pathetic.
That's pathetic. That's really pathetic.
I mean, I don't think we can underestimate, because like how, I don't want to exaggerate her influence, but I also don't want to underestimate it, because I really think that she was very much central in informing the perceptions of a lot of plugged-in media types who looked at her built-up credibility over the years, even go back to her Scooter Libby stuff, and said that, okay, I guess there is something to this.
But if I guess my only thing there is if not Marcy, there would have been someone else to play that role.
I don't know, but she has very unique skill set.
I wouldn't give her that much credit, but who knows?
Who's the researcher that has done what she does?
There are plenty of people there's anybody with a senior fellowship at some kind of fancy think tank can get cited as an expert on how the Russians are controlling our society. By the way, Marcy got recently a gig at George Washington University.
I heard about that. What's the deal with that?
That's what you get.
A lot of spooks in that.
A lot of spooks in that shop. And that's what you get when you.
And she got it, in 2017 after she had been feverishly covering Russiagate. But here's another ethical violation that's sort of ancillary to the Mammoth one, which was burning the source.
Yeah.
And she's still committing ethical violations by not telling us what this supposed bombshell conspiracy proof that she has was. My favorite thing was when she was on Blogging Heads with Bob Wright, and it was like, the FBI might have just decided that I'm crazy. It's like, oh, okay, that sounds pretty plausible. But so she was feverishly covering every single aspect of this Mueller investigation while not disclosing for months until July of 2018, after the Mueller investigation had been going on for like over a year. She didn't disclose the fact that she had participated in it voluntarily and proactively until a year plus later. Again, that's the kind of stuff that in a traditional newsroom would have gotten you fired.
The only thing there, though, is did she even participate in it? Because
she claims she did.
I don't even think that Mueller's
I don't think she really did. I think she probably got laughed out of the room.
Yeah, I mean,
but she claims she did.
I suspect what happened is see, again, like we don't know for sure, so who knows? But I mean, if you go to the FBI with the tip, they'll talk to you.
They'll talk to you, but it doesn't mean they give a shit.
So that's what I suspect happened. So that's just part of the reason why I just don't want to, imbue her with more importance than she does. I take your point. I think it's a fair one.
Yeah.
That purportedly serious journalists cited her as a serious journalist, and again, I'll say it again: the most noble, adversarial, lefty show there is, Democracy Now!, which, I love with all my heart. I was there for 10 years. The fact that Marcy Wheeler was their go-to Russiagate analyst, to me, is like...
It's a disgrace.
It's a disgrace. It's like... And I don't know the proper way to deal with it, and it's hard to get accountability because shows like DN, their brand is, and they've rightfully earned the reputation of being the exception to the rulers for pushing back. And so, but Russiagate's a case where everybody partook, everybody drank the Kool-Aid, everybody hit from the bong. And so to get accountability, it's just going to be tough.
But as tedious and as painful as it's going to be, and as much as she's going to resist it, we have to highlight what the consequences of her conduct were.
Yeah.
I mean, on its face, so much of what she said was just lunacy.
It's insane. It really is insane. And the problem is us in our little group, we only have so much time, and
I know.
And these things, it takes time to do anything, and so
Well, I'm writing a piece now. I'm gonna at least make some reference to it. It's not gonna be anywhere near the comprehensive case.
To write the definitive Marcy Wheeler takedown would
I don't even know how anybody.
Things don't work, but it should be done.
You have to hole yourself up in a closet somewhere for a month straight.
I mean, I wrote the Rachel Maddow takedown piece, and that took up I had to watch that show every night for I don't know 6 weeks, and
I don't think I could handle that.
I mean, it was tough, and so
that's bleak.
Let's pause for 1 second. I'm just gonna take a leak.
Yeah. I should regale listeners with personal stories or something while Aaron's in the bathroom, so I don't have to actually edit this podcast because that's annoying. Yeah, I mean, I know people listening to this are going to think, "Oh, you guys are so petty and narrow-minded because you're relitigating Twitter beefs." No, that's not the point. Twitter's a hugely influential medium that not every, but a huge swath of the media ecosystem is constantly tethered to. So if Marcy Wheeler is the dominant, Russiagate chronicler in the media, and she's constantly lighting up Twitter with her, batshit theories, then it's not only justified, it's almost morally obligatory to pay her the attention from a critical perspective that we're paying her right now. I mean, she was integral. I think I will make that case again in informing how this entire narrative unfolded. And I think she has to be held accountable. And I'm not trying to be vindictive. I'm trying to be prudent. It would be imprudent not to demand accountability of some kind for her, just as it was imprudent, or it would have been imprudent not to demand the same of Judith Miller during Iraq WMD. And again, I'm not saying that their offenses caused equivalent death and destruction, right? I'm saying that the scope of the media error in both cases is comparable. So if she was among the most significant journalists in this entire saga, and her error created this set of circumstances in a serious way, then yeah, it's incumbent on us to hold her accountable. But it has to be stressed, not for vindictive or petty or personal reasons. You know?
It's hard not to be either. It's hard not to be vindictive and petty.
I know. I mean, we would have every right to be vindictive and petty, right?
No, we don't, though.
But I feel like
we have every motivation to be vindictive and petty.
But it's wise to cultivate a general life approach where you're not.
It doesn't help.
Motivated by that kind of thing.
Having acted often out of vindictiveness and pettiness, right. I can tell you, it never helps. It never helps you. You know, I've hurt myself through pettiness so many times, and I'm sure I still will. It's so tempting.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. So, is there anything else we should touch on?
Well, I think we should at least welcome the fact that we are in a new chapter. Russiagate is not over.
No.
But we're in a new chapter now. And if anyone's listening who has felt, as we have, you know, isolated and upset by what Russiagate
ostracized,
and just
made to feel insane,
and just depressed and scared for where the whole nation is going, based on the fact that, like, the dominant way to oppose Donald Trump was via a conspiracy theory, and the dominant way to do journalism on this vital issue, which it was to abandon all principles and all the basic tenets of the trade. You know, take heart that we're in a new phase now where the conspiracy theory is no longer sustainable. Like, it's those who are trying to maintain it now who are on the defensive. It's not us anymore.
And those people are going to inevitably look progressively ludicrous.
Even worse than they do already.
And they look horrible now, but it's just they're going to get become dead. And I'm calling them collusion truthers.
Collusion truthers. And the thing is, we're saying this, the report hasn't even come out yet.
Right.
And there is no, like, by all indications, you know, all the excuses they have, like, in saying that there's a cover-up of the truth. Well, Robert Mueller is assisting with the redactions.
Yeah.
The White House has said it's not even going to...
Trump said, release the full report.
The White House, according to Barr, is not even invoking executive privilege, which they had every right to, given this is an investigation of the president. But they're not... So obviously they've gotten the signal that, like, or they're so confident that the report is not damning to the White House at all, which all this means that it's going to be an even harder time to sustain this collusion, this conspiracy theory fantasy. And, you know, that's a good thing for anybody who cares about, you know, journalism in any remotely serious way and politics in a serious way, because our politics can return to a place where it's not shaped by your proximity to a conspiracy theory, you know, or by how much reverence you're willing to show for, like, the national security state. It's going to hopefully return to a place where we can discuss serious issues, and it's an opportunity for all of us who care about these things to seize, you know. And it's great to see you, Michael, in this context, you know. Not
because, like, it's good because, you know, you and I have done a lot of media about this recently, whether it's a podcast or YouTube stuff or whatever it may be, but it's a lot more fruitful, I think, to actually talk to somebody who's been, like, in the weeds.
Yeah.
Because then you don't have to like explain obscure things that like only a handful of weirdos are like intimately acquainted with.
That's true.
It's just we have all kinds of mutual reference points that are kind of confined to our little group.
Yeah.
That makes these kinds of conversations, I think, useful. And that it was the same with when I did with Taibbi, and because. Again, we kind of feel like we've been almost at war or something together,
Although it is a lot of fun to debate collusion truthers.
Yeah.
It's pretty fun. I know. Because they have nothing except conjecture and and their imagination. I
love here's the talking point I love. Okay. It's like but why do they all lie?
Yeah.
If there was nothing to hide.
Yeah.
And then why is Trump always so suspiciously flattering to Putin? Why has he never criticized Putin?
Yeah.
Those are what they cling to.
Yeah.
I don't even want to rebut them. They're not even worth rebutting.
They're both. I mean, the lying one at least, I think has some currency with people. Although if you go through every single
lie,
you see how there was nothing for them to cover up. And they were, in most of their cases, they were lying because they felt as if, like in the case of
the liars are the security state guys who launched an investigation on false pretenses, evidently.
Sure, and yes, in terms of like
they're the liars.
Yeah, and like doing things like the FISA,
using the Steele dossier to get a FISA warrant on Carter Page. That's a lie.
Yeah. And and all the national security
all this
officials,
like shady stuff in terms of how they approach Papadopoulos, probably some lies there.
Yeah, and in terms of all the liars who leaked stuff like they did to the New York Times in February 2017, getting the Times to publish a piece saying that top Trump officials were in touch with senior Russian intelligence officials. Yeah. Think about that. I'm sure Matt Taibbi talked to you about it. It's mind blowing. That was printed in the New York Times. Somebody leaked that with the intent to fuel this conspiracy theory, even though it was totally
there were
not
so
true.
Many leaks like that for the first 6 months of 2017.
Yeah.
To the point that like every single day at 5 p.m. on these Eastern Standard Time, there seemed to be one of these bombshell boom blockbusters.
Yeah.
And all of them now, I mean, if you think about them in hindsight, it's like, what did they amount to?
Yeah.
They were never bombshells or blockbusters. Even though the New York Times and Washington Post got lavished with all kinds of Pulitzers for them, they were ultimately inconsequential stories given to them by sources that obviously had a stake in furthering this whole narrative, and I guess getting a special counsel established at some point. Again, we still have so little information about how all this progressed.
Yeah. What we know is that some of those stories were straight up false, like that claim that Trump officials were talking to senior Russian intelligence officials. That was a straight up concoction. We don't know. The Times hasn't even retracted that story yet.
Yeah, it's still up.
Even though James Comey even publicly denied it a few months later, it's still up. And but now that doesn't excuse Trump. That doesn't mean that we can just downplay Trump officials or Trump campaign associates for lying. But if you look at all their lies, go through them one by one, they're all relatively inconsequential. They're not covering up anything substantial, and they're really just done because in the case of Papadopoulos, he just didn't want to, he was trying to protect Trump, and he thought that being associated with possibly with a story in which someone is told about some compromising information on Hillary Clinton and the Russians are mentioned, he just didn't want it. He didn't want Trump to be involved.
But the lies are almost immaterial. I mean, if you're under duress by the FBI and you're not lying to actually cover up a conspiracy, you're just lying for, I don't know, like half-baked political maneuvering reasons.
Or you don't even, or in the case of Flynn, it's quite possible you're not even lying. You don't even remember. Yeah.
Right. So it's just like the lies themselves didn't amount to anything.
Yeah. Michael Cohen's lie was about to Congress, not even to Mueller, but to Congress, was about when he stopped arguing with Felix Sater about the fact that the Trump Tower Moscow was going nowhere.
Right.
It's presented as the negotiations about Trump Tower Moscow.
Right.
There were no negotiations. There was the only Russian involvement was a second-tier development bank that signed a non-binding letter of intent with the Trump organization. A couple of Russian officials sent some invites to Cohen, but these are the same invites that everybody gets if you want to go to this big, huge conference in St. Petersburg in June.
Right.
But in terms of actual negotiations,
there was nothing.
There was none. And basically Cohen told
They were trying to capitalize on the fact that Trump had built this huge global brand as a result of his successful presidential campaign.
Yeah, it was a branding exercise.
It's not a conspiracy.
No, exactly.
Or a quid pro quo.
Yeah, so all these things, think about how much mileage the Trump Tower Moscow thing got in Cohen and,
Rob Goldstone, seriously? He's the mastermind?
Exactly. Like him being a Russian
It's just a
agent
comical figure.
who, by the way,
he had to, his life is ruined too.
Yeah, although he got a book deal, so maybe
he did. But I mean, you think he wanted to spend 2 years on this subject?
No. I feel for Rob.
It's actually a big burden on him, and people don't have any sympathy. They can't muster up any sympathy for these people because they're all associated with Trump. But some of them are so tangential. Like Goldstone, he's not a Trump associate.
No, he's a publicist.
He's a music publicist. He's some random British guy
who wrote like a trumped up email where he invented the fact that like the Russian government wanted to support Donald Trump. Yeah. And he came up with things like the Crown Prosecutor of Russia.
Doesn't exist.
Because he's British, but that existed in Britain, so he just made that up for Russia. So it's like, the whole thing is a joke, but yet all these people are supposed to be Russian agents and Russian intermediaries, and they're the fodder night after night for like a tale told on MSNBC and elsewhere of a conspiracy between Trump and Russia. And one day we'll look back on it and just laugh because it's fucking hilarious.
I'm laughing already.
Me too.
Yeah. All right. Let's leave it there.
Michael, thanks for having me.
Yeah, this was great. And we'll do it again sometime.
I look forward to it.
All righty. Bye-bye.
All right, there you have it. All I can do is just laugh. I don't know what else to say at this point. But that was deeply satisfying for me. Hope it was the same for you. Once again, please subscribe on Patreon and YouTube, and be on the lookout for when this podcast gets put on all the typical directories and such. So I'll be in touch. Take care.